What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the Fringe. Weird things. Not weird, but a little bit of movement going on in the old Alberta Independence forum as Danielle Smith has her deadline fast approaching. Next week, in fact, for Mark Carney, based on where Alberta goes moving forward. What you're going to see next week as the Alberta Prosperity Project heads back into court to figure out what's going on with their application for their constitutional question about Alberta Separation / Independence, Danielle is also on her deadline for Mark Carney. So there's going to be a lot of things happening next week that really shake things up with Alberta Independence. But lines are going to be drawn in the sand. I've often said on this channel, should Danielle back down and show Mark Carney that Alberta is weak by not following through with her threat, it is going to drastically shape up where Danielle goes from here. But before we get into that, folks, I want you to pay attention to this week's sponsor, who's also in favor of a better Alberta, growing from the ground up. Huge shout out to this video's sponsor, Growing from the Ground Up. 3.5 years ago, Growing from the Ground Up started with one big idea: that Alberta's farmers deserve a fair way to get their food into your hands. They saw small family farms struggling to reach customers because the traditional grocery system had too many barriers. So they built something new, an online community where Alberta's farmers can sell directly to you. Think of it like a digital farmers market. Fresh, local, transparent, and built for the people who care where their food comes from. Their farmers don't rely on pesticides, hormones, or shortcuts. They rely on passion for the land, for their animals, and for feeding Alberta families with real, natural food. When you shop with Growing from the Ground Up, you're doing more than buying groceries. You're keeping Alberta's economy strong, helping small farms stay independent, and giving new farmers a reason to plant their first seeds. Even spending just $50 every 2 weeks makes a huge impact. Imagine 1,000 Albertans doing that. That's $50,000 going straight back into local farms, strengthening our communities from the ground up. Join the movement now. Support Alberta farmers. Build a food system that grows with integrity, transparency, and heart. Feed your family, fuel your community, grow Alberta. Now, just a reminder, folks, as we get on with this news story, don't forget to use the code FRINGE10, FRINGE10, upon checkout as a coupon code, should you decide that Growing from the Ground Up is for you, to save 10% off your order over at Growing from the Ground Up. They're a fantastic company. I can't endorse them enough. Go and show them your support now and support local Alberta farmers and not big retail grocery stores. I'm going to have Jeff Raff on the channel this week, hopefully, pending his schedule. He's a very busy man, to chat a little bit more about what's coming up at the AGM. If you haven't yet got your tickets to the AGM, the Alberta General Meeting, I would encourage everybody watching this video, Google over at UCP membership. I believe it's like $5 or $10. Grab your membership, register for tickets for the AGM, because there's a vote coming up, which, to my understanding, is very crucial to Alberta independence at the AGM. We're going to go through Jeff Rath's article here, and then I'm going to bring Jeff onto the channel to talk a little bit more in depth as to what the Western Standard puts out here in terms of Alberta's future. It says here, Jeff Rath is a constitutional lawyer who represents the interests of citizens and communities whose rights are infringed by the government. Jeff Rath is a good friend of this channel. I consider him a friend personally, and he's very well spoken and very passionate about Alberta getting its independence. Some people at times can say he's a bit aggressive, but I say it's passion. It says here, the Danielle Smith empire is striking back. The word is out. Danielle Smith's Death Star team, again, a lot of Star Wars references, is abusing its access to party membership lists. It is desperately calling members who believes it will support Danielle Smith's anti-democratic views on the AGM 2025 by offering to pay their way to the AGM out of what funds, we ask, if they support Danielle's slate of directors and purge the party board of anybody supporting independence for Alberta. Complaints by offended members of the party are being prepared and are soon to follow. All of this foolishness started at a recent not-so-United Conservative Party provincial board meeting. Danielle Smith put forward an anti-democratic motion to muzzle the 70% of UCP members who strongly support Alberta independence. The motion split the board right down the middle, leaving Rob Smith to cast the deciding vote. So keep in mind again, this wasn't Danielle Smith putting her foot down on the independence talk. This is a board that voted, and Rob Smith was left with the deciding vote. Shocking, all the people, included myself, that voted for Rob Smith to replace Cynthia Moore, an establishment today of the First Order. Rob turned his back on the people that elected him UCP party president and cast his tie vote to have Premier Smith bully her base into silent submission. So keep in mind, this board decides what moves forward at the AGM, not necessarily Danielle Smith as a person. This is why I say that a lot of people come back at the Premier and say, hey, how come you're not doing this with laws? How come you're not doing that? There's a lot of votes and there's a lot of things. I've said often, she has to go back to the party. She has to make sure everybody at the party is on board. Because if they don't agree with what she's doing, she can lose her job. So this is where it comes to the AGM and why it's important. As a result, the majority of UCP members that voted for Rob Smith as president will now be voting for Daryl Comic as UCP president. Daryl is needed as president at this time because 70% of the UCP base will not tolerate a president that sides with bullying by the premier of the very poor people that elected her leader. Daryl has pledged to launch a rescue mission for party unity. That means respecting the wishes of a supermajority of the membership in favor of independence while accommodating the concerns of members of the party who have not yet embraced how much better off Alberta will be outside of Canada. So what Jeff is talking about here is the AGM vote for UCP president on the board. Rob Smith will be up for re-election. APP, namely Jeff Rath in this article, is calling for Daryl Comic to be voted in and is asking anybody who supports independence who has their AGM tickets to vote in favor of Daryl as he backs Alberta independence and will not allow it to be muzzled in between the parties. Now, from what I can understand from reading this, and again, the information that I take in, is one of the biggest concerns, and you have to understand the uphill battle. This is not an attack at specifically Danielle Smith. There are going to be a lot of interested groups coming out full force to ensure that Alberta either does not get its vote or does not succeed with its vote. The federal government can, as you see with floor crossings, send in somebody who's here to essentially throw a wrench in the works or make things a little less easy for Albertans to get their say in a vote or even get it through. By putting Daryl Comic at the head of the president board, it essentially paints a path that independence will not be halted. It gives us kind of an ace up the sleeve. So it goes on in the article to say, Daryl has pledged to launch a rescue mission for the party unity. Again, this means respecting the wishes of a supermajority. But Albertans need a party president who can stand up to a premier who refuses to respect the rights and freedoms of the people who chose her to lead the party. Again, we're talking about the party here. Had Rob stood up to Premier Smith as opposed to curling up his feet, Daryl Comic would not be running for president, and Rob Smith would have been acclaimed to another term as president. Now, keep in mind here, folks, this is Jeff Rath's article. So this is one person's opinion. I'm showing you, again here, as somebody who gives you the facts, where the frustrations lie. This is not my words or opinion. But I do believe Daryl Comic is a benefit if it's going to promote independence. The point of Premier Smith's motion was to prohibit any discussion of independence at the upcoming AGM. She's using her power as influence as premier to bully 70% of her base into shutting up and doing what they are told. I don't buy into all of that. Again, that's why I want to have Jeff on the channel. I don't think the premier is the sole villain here. My focus is purely on we need the vote and we need to get the hell out. So we'll bring Jeff on to talk about his bias and why he believes this. But he goes on to say, it's like she believes that she is everybody's mother and she can tell us what we can and can't discuss at Sunday dinner. She obviously cares more about Nenshi and the NDP, accusing her of leading a pro-independence party, which she is. And that she is in respecting the rights of her base to free speech, debate, and the democratic will of her base. Well, that essentially should be her push forward. Because if I were Danielle Smith, what you have to take into consideration, again, trying to devil's advocate of what Jeff's saying here, Danielle Smith, as of the 16th of November, in just 5 days, has two paths to choose. Either move the path that pushes independence and the majority of her UCP base that support it, or bend the knee to Mark Carney, lose the support of your base, everybody goes home and finds somebody else to vote for in the next election, probably giving Naheed Nenshi the upper hand. If you stifle the people of Alberta that want to get out, if you go against your base right now, all paths lead to losing your seat as the Premier of Alberta. If you tell the Alberta people on the 16th of November or the 17th, whenever you choose to address them, that, hey, Mark Carney's trying to work with us, we're still going to give him time, we're still going to allow for this, here's a few breadcrumbs, here's a single pipeline, here's talks about the emission caps going away as long as we do X, Y, Z. If you come with that to the Alberta people, they're going to revolt. They will not accept it. And they will assume that Danielle looks weak. She will lose her approval from the Alberta people. No different than Doug Ford does when he props up Mark Carney himself. If she goes in on independence, and again, Cory Morgan said it best, she doesn't have to do anything right now aside from come out and say, I'm going to allow the democratic will of the people, here's the referendum date, and allow parties to campaign for the vote. And just sit back and say, it's the will of the people. If she goes that route, she wins this argument and essentially could retain her seat by saying, if the vote goes through, it goes through. If it doesn't, I'll still be here to defend Albertans. She would retain her numbers by respecting the democratic will of her base, as Jeff Rath points out. If she does nothing, Naheed Nenshi wins the next election. That's why this Daryl comic is so important to this UCP AGM vote. Had she simply allowed the debate, her base would have felt respected and heard. Albertans could have finally heard from either Danielle or her designated master debater, I love that term, which the real intangible financial benefits are to Alberta staying in Canada. Danielle Smith has been hand-delivered a copy of the Alberta Prosperity Project's Value of Freedom, fully costed fiscal plan for an independent Alberta. This document demonstrates that when Alberta is independent from Ottawa, we will have $30 to $50 billion a year fiscal capacity surplus after funding all federal services and liabilities, including pensions, old age security, EI, armed forces, First Nations, immigration and deportation, and all other federal services and transfers. So for people asking, what about my old age security? What about all those other, it's worked into that value of freedom. You can also, as it says, go over to albertaprosperityproject.com and download a PDF of that document and look at it for yourself. I would highly recommend it. A free and independent Alberta would be able to eliminate federal income taxes while maintaining and improving existing programs and services, including health care. and education. A failure by Premier Smith's government to immediately name a Minister of Independence, Preparedness, and to embrace the economic plan laid out in the Value of Freedom violates the basic fiduciary principle of a prudent person of business managing their own affairs. In other words, Premier Smith and her government, in failing to plan for independence, are violating their fiduciary obligations to the Albertans who elected them. A failure to plan is deliberately planning to fail. All of this comes at a time when Premier Smith has been burning political capital like a drunk lighting cigarettes with $100 bills. Her attempts at portraying herself as a member of Team Canada, complete with dressing up like a Canadian flag in her red blazer over a white blouse costume, have completely failed, and she was told it would buy every Albertan with a lick of common sense. Every time she supported Team Canada, she was embarrassed by her teammates cross-checking her in the face and slashing at her ankles with all of there will be a pipeline there through my province over my dead body. Obstreperousness. I can't even... Perouseness? I don't even know what that word is. I apologize. My dyslexia can't even get around that one, Jeff, but I commend you for using it. If Premier Smith cared about democracy, she would call for a free vote at the UCP AGM to ask her party members to vote on the question, do you agree that Alberta should cease to be a province of Canada and become an independent state? Unfortunately, that level of bold leadership is sorely lacking. So this is Jeff's article, Jeff's opinion. Again, I see the passion in what he's saying, and I'm not pushing him down for what he's saying either. I think that this discourse is necessary if we're ever going to get to a headwind on independence. I agree with Corey Morgan's take that Danielle Smith's best approach at this point could be to simply step back and say, I'm going to allow the democratic process for a referendum. We have all the signatures in place from Tom Lacaze's petition. We will construct a constitutional question, whether that be APP's or anybody else's, but it's by the will of the Albertans. I wash my hands of this. This is the date for the vote, and then just sit back and watch the show. That would not only bolster her numbers, but show that she's listening to her base, that she's allowing people the right to the democratic process, and let the cards fall where they may. Those who push for independence would gladly acknowledge the results of a free and fair election, should it be free and fair, even if it doesn't work out in their favor. But the path of if denialism is happening, if you're going to push those with a voice out and contradict all of the things you've stood for, it will be the end of Danielle Smith. And it will be the end of a free and fair Alberta. The Liberals will sink their talons into this province and decimate it well below the grave. I've said many times, even this week on live stream, I believe that Danielle is effectively trying to show that I'm trying to work with Canada. They don't want to work with me. She's hoping that that middle majority of voters who haven't decided yet where they stand on independence will see for themselves, will open their eyes and say, this country isn't working for me anymore. So that there isn't a vast push to convince those that we need to leave, that it's maybe more of a sure thing. I've questioned what happens if that doesn't work. We're running out of time. So I kind of agree with both sides of the sentiment here. I do agree with others who say sometimes I feel personally that maybe Jeff needs to come back on the attacks a little bit. However, Jeff is arguing his passion. Jeff is arguing an independent Alberta, and that's his focus. And I think that needs to be our focus, because we've all seen what happens when we allow our favoritism of those who represent us to get in the way of actual policy, of actual results. When we get rose-colored glasses, it sometimes ends up costing us, just like it did in the federal election. Let me know what you think down below in the comments. Will you be going to the AGM if you're in Alberta? Will you be voting for Daryl Comic? Do you agree with what Jeff is saying? Or do you think there's more to this picture? Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. If it's your first time here, I hope this video has earned your subscription. Don't forget to smack that button the subscribe button if you support Alberta Independence. Join me live on the channel each and every Wednesday and Friday night for Unhinged Fringe on Wednesdays, Friday Night Fringe on Fridays, as I'm joined by my new co-host, Matt, on Wednesdays, the beautiful Mrs. Fringe on Friday, as we talk about everything that happened this week in politics, everything we know coming up in the week ahead, as well as Q&A within the greatest YouTube community on the platform. It happens every Wednesday and Friday here on the channel, folks. Looking forward to seeing you guys there, starting at 6 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Central. With that said, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you have a great rest of your day. I'll catch you on the next one.